Okay, within endocrine systems, an equivalent one is as follows, something that you see that goes wrong in diabetes, adult onset diabetes. One of the things you have is a number of ways things can go wrong, but what your body does is when there's glucose in the bloodstream, when you've just had a meal, when you have all these nutrients in the bloodstream, your pancreas can detect the levels of glucose in your bloodstream and secretes insulin. Sugar shows up in the bloodstream, glucose, you secrete insulin, and what insulin does is tell your fat cells to absorb the sugar and store it away. Great, but you've got a problem, which is that your fat cells are already full because you are a typical westernized human and you've been eating to excess, and what you have is fat cells that are full up and they stop listening to insulin, because they can't take it anymore, because they can't take up any more stuff and store it away. The cells begin to be insulin resistant. And we'll see in a minute how that works. So suddenly you have fat cells that aren't responding to insulin, and what happens is your pancreas says, this is crazy. We're trying to get rid of the sugar from the bloodstream and it's not disappearing. The person just ate 8 Hershey bars and their fat cells are already full, but we're not clearing the sugar out of the bloodstream, so let's secrete even more insulin. And let's secrete even more insulin. And what happens at the fat cells? They say, this is ridiculous. We're full up, forget it. We're not taking up any more of these nutrient things. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to decrease the number of our insulin receptors. We are going to down-regulate our number of insulin receptors, and the pancreas freaks out and secretes even more insulin as a result, and you down-regulate even more, and what you have is this downward spiral. Because at some point, your pancreas is working so hard to dump these boatloads of insulin into the bloodstream that your body is paying no attention to, that you burn out the cells in your pancreas that make insulin, and now you got yourself a real serious problem. What's the key of what's going wrong here? Too much nutrients, and thus too much insulin, and the fat cells begin to say, we're not going to listen to it. And they downregulate receptors. More insulin, downregulate, and this is at the core of what goes wrong in diabetes. So we see these autoregulatory changes, and they can emerge slowly. They can help explain why some of these drugs work. Almost certainly, they help explain what's wrong in some of these psychiatric diseases, metabolic diseases. What's the punchline there? Number one, the amount of a messenger is important, but the sensitivity to the messenger is at least as important. You have as much capacity to regulate this as this in these biological systems, and thus you have as much potential for screwing up at this end as screwing up with the amount of messenger.